Everyone, we still have the same secretary. What we're going to talk about this morning is evolution. So hopefully you'll be able to find that, no matter what it says. I think it says evening, but man, it's hard to find good. We're going to be talking about evolution, but you know, I covered this a while back in a very intense way, looking at it from the viewpoint of man and making it obvious that what man does is they ignore the facts and they actually choose to find evolution true, and they do that because of the fact that they want to. How do you suppress the truth? You suppress the truth with a lie, and the more you use a lie, the more you're suppressing the truth. And the problem with that is that we have a group of parents and grandparents and children of these parents who now firmly believe that evolution is true, except for the fact that it can't be validated by objective science. It can only be validated by subjective science, which means if you bring information to the subject, you're going to find what you want. Excuse me, I have a crick in my neck, and so if you think I'm ignoring you over here, I'm not. It's just that I have to move my whole body instead of looking, like, but maybe I should look this way, and that way, anyway, and we know that money talks, and so when they would go to carbon date a bone, they bring it back and say, well, this bone was 7,000 years, and the person would say, wow, that's what I thought it would come out to be. Person's paying for the exam. I thought it'd be a lot higher than that. They said, well, let me check it again. And they come back and say, you're right, it's something like a million years old. And so the money talks and people get kind of answers they want when they're paying for it. But what we want to discuss is, how is it that man can know about evolution being wrong? How can man know that God created the earth? Now, in this first verse of the Genesis 1, most people can quote it from memory, but in here you'll notice he gives all of the statements of life. He gives not only time, he gives space and matter. And so we see this is the only religious writing that groups scientifically the beginning of time. Let's take a look. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now that's the first point. And so what he's saying is you don't have to look any further for the answer. Only God, and it's not Yid. You see what I'm talking about? Your secretary is horrible. But only God was there to record from the beginning. There is no way you can record a beginning of something unless you were there. And the problem that the people today of evolution who want to talk about billions and billions of years old Earth is because for a cold-blooded creature to turn into a hot-blooded creature, there has to be so many mutations that they realized the millions of years wasn't enough, so they tacked on even more time. The problem with it is it can't happen. All mutations that happen to a creature is against the host, in other words, against the creature. whether it be mankind or animals or whatever. You can imagine if a bird, a fish sprouted wings or something like that, it would slow them down. It would make it impossible for them to move. And so the only mutation that has a benefit is sickle cell anemia, because people have sickle cell anemia, which means their cells are more like a sickle than round. They're more shaped like a sickle, and that's why they cram up together. I know this stuff. And they have problems with it, but the only mutation that happened from that is they can't get malaria. Now with the sickle cell, I can't say it now. They have problems with it crowding up together and causing a blood clot, which will kill you if you can't have a hospital that can help them through the situation with fluids and so on. So there are no mutations that are good for the host, for people, for animals, for anything. And we can see throughout creation how that God's design is there. And what we're doing is we are helping them by teaching God's design so that they can identify with God and come out of the confused world that we see them in. And what do we know about it? We know that God created things in a fashion. And He created things with a greater and greater and greater intelligence and purpose. And as we see this, He created the earth even on, this is kind of hard, He created the earth even on the first day of the week, and we'll see that it was formed out of nothing, and that's how we get time. The revolution of the earth gives us hours in the day when we determine a morning and an evening and where time goes along and becomes a part of our life. And time is just a measurement, folks. All this talking about going back in time is just goofy, because time is a measurement, and you can't go backwards, you can't go forwards. It's a measurement from a specific time in history. For example, your birth. And your birth is I was talking to the bank lady the other day, and she was saying, how old are you? I said, I'm 71. And I said, I'm going to be 72 in March. And I said, I've never been this old. And she said, really? And I'm thinking, neither of you, But you don't have opportunities to do anything else. And there are books and books and books and books written about what might be the way. Maybe God caused evolution to be true and made it where that man that changed and evolved, and then he became man. And you would say to him, well, wait a minute. When did God put in the soul? Because it doesn't tell us that. But we know that every single person on earth has a soul. We've been told that by God. And we've been given that soul at conception. We know that because that's when life came into them and started making who they are. And so there's maybe books and books on it, but that doesn't mean anything. The only force that is great enough to create what we have is God. The only force that's strong enough to create a plant when you plant a seed is God. You can't do it. You can plant the seed, you can till the soil, you can water, you can feed, but you can't make it grow. You can't even make the air to make your own life. You have to have certain proponents together. I'm listening and talking about going into space and maybe inhabiting Mars. Well, they're going to have to send spaceships up there of certain chemicals in order to accomplish that. You ever seen the shows Star Trek or Star Wars or wherever it may be? And they engage into warp one, and boom, all of a sudden the stars kind of disappear, and then they just kind of zoom by. We have no force to do that. We have no ability to accomplish that. In fact, we have jet fuel, which is pretty strong, and the jet fuel can take 300 fat people with their luggage off of the runway and put them in the air and take them across the world. But you know what? You can't do that with solar energy. You can't do. We have nuclear energy, which can produce a lot of things, but it can't make this happen. And so what we see is, when we study the Big Bang, we've got to say to ourselves, how is that true? They said a little portion, something, came into this particular area, and then it exploded, and everything that exploded became what we see now in the universe. That's ridiculous. It'd be like an explosion in a printing press, and all of a sudden you have the dictionary. There's just no way that can happen, because order doesn't come out of chaos. Now, God said it came from nothing, He created into nothing, but He's the one who created. He's the one that started. He's the one with the force. In fact, the fastest airplanes we have, now this is a Pakistani airplane, in case you were wondering, it was just a good picture. And the fastest planes we have can only go so fast. And they can't go as fast as Superman did around the world, so they turned the world backwards, so we went back in time. And that doesn't work. It isn't possible. So the only force we have that is that great is God, because He has all the force there is. He is almighty. He is the one that can create. I mean, even Elon Musk will tell you, he's got to use certain kind of forces in order to break the gravity of the Earth's pull, to be able to get out into space. You know what? One time I was up on top of a pretty good sized building, and I think it was 3 stories, and I was pulling up by a rope a piece of plywood. And the piece of plywood got heavier and heavier and heavier the higher I pulled it. Then once I got on top of the building, it was totally different in weight. So you can imagine, if you're trying to get outside of this atmosphere, the amount of force it's going to take to be able to get you to the point where you can pierce that firmament and be able to get outside of this barrier that protects us from all the space trash out there and stuff like that. And I don't know whether you remember or not, but when I was a little kid, we always worried about the spaceship coming back in and whether it was going to burn up, and they had to have these special heat shields inside. Do you people remember that? And they worried if one of them fell off, that it might burn the people inside, and so they sent animals up first and brought them back, and that was safe. Well, Mr. Musk is so sharp, he can bring that spaceship back and hook it right back on those arms. It's just amazing the quality he has, but you know what? He still can't go beyond the laws God has set here on earth. And once you understand that, you can understand because the purpose of the earth. Well, let me ask you a question. What is the purpose of the earth? The purpose of the earth is so that God's will be done. What He wants to do is He wants to be able to separate Himself from evil forevermore. And when we're in heaven, there will be no evil there. There will be only good. There will be no crying, no sighing, no hurting, no bad knees. There will be no pain or suffering, because all of that is from Satan. And he tells us Satan will not be there. He is in charge of hell. He will be with those in hell, and they will be there with him. And so when we think about this, what's the reason of the earth? Or let me rephrase that. What's the reason of the universe? I don't know whether you've ever played with a top when you were a kid. We used to have a real big one, and we would go, we could wind it up by pushing a thing in it, and it would start, we'd throw it out there, and it would land on the ground and just spin like crazy. Well, it required the whole thing to be able to spin, and we see that all of this is spinning. In fact, we sing a song about how the music of the spheres sings the praise of God. This is my Father's world. Do you remember that song? And now you're all singing it in your head. Okay, so in that song, he's talking about, they're talking about how the spheres move around, and they make a noise when they do it. And one of the problems we have around here is falling rocks. And not just falling rocks, but fallen rocks. And they may have fallen since the last time you've been through there. And the reason why is because everything is moving. The earth is moving, the cars are bouncing along, the river's moving, the boats are moving down the river, and so it moves these rocks. As things move, they give off a sound. Have you ever seen where they take and hook up a speaker, a real high speaker, to leaves, and they put out this most beautiful sound? So you can imagine the universe is making sound that God hears that is going correctly. In fact, tonight we're going to be talking about Beyond the Stars, and he's going to tell us the very first thing is how all the animals and the fish and the earth and birds all know he is God. You know who the ones don't know? Well, that would be those of us who haven't looked at the nature and known that there is a God. And so when we think about this, and he tells us at the end of time, depart from evil, or he tells us for now, depart from evil and do good and dwell forevermore. What's he saying? On this earth, while you're on this earth, here's what you need to do. Depart from evil, do what is good, and you'll be able to live forevermore with him. He tells us this all along. His loving words tell us this so that we can know exactly what we're supposed to do and what we will get. And so, I'm sorry, that means there's no aliens out there. In fact, when they came back from the first moon landing up there, they took, and they were very concerned about this, they were quarantining the astronauts, and they were quarantining them because they were afraid they were going to bring back some kind of space disease we didn't have. And they looked at all the rocks and all the dust that was there, and guess what they found? There was zero life on them, not even scum or mold or anything else. Zero life. So now, we have been listening for years and years and years and years. We've not heard anything out there. We've not seen anything. There's been no green men from Mars show up. They also found out there was no cheese on the moon. And so if you want to involve yourself in that, you're involving yourself in a waste of time. Because God has said he created the heavens, plural, and the earth, singular dwelling place. And he did so for the specific purpose of separating himself from evil forevermore. And if we follow him and we separate ourselves from evil, we will be with him, which is being locked in good forevermore. What a beautiful idea and concept that is. Now let's take a look at the fact that man is too small. Let's go over to Job. I really love these last chapters of Job where God is talking to him. He has been allowing Job to complain for about 30-something chapters, and then he finally has had enough. The friends are gone, and he turns around, and God starts talking to him. Listen to what he says here in Job 1, verses 1 through 4. 38 verses 1 through 4. Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. He said, "Who is this who darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand." Wow, that's some pretty scary stuff, isn't it? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? You know what we know? We know that when he set the earth, we know it says in Isaiah that it is a sphere hanging on nothing. What are the foundations? They're the laws of how that earth is going to stand right there and do exactly what he said, because he said do it. So what do we know? We know that man is too small to create the world. There's no way that it was done by us. It was done by God. Now here's where we get to this thinking. At one time, in about the 13 to 1500s, there was a time period of where man thought about who they were and how they considered themselves. And the people in France looked around through the world, and they looked all the way down to Africa, and they said, look at those people down there in Africa. They are living in mud huts, and they're hunting animals with spears. And they said, let's look at what we have. And they have these great buildings with art and great songs and great music. And they say, there's no way that we have that and they're still living like this. That means that man evolved. Let me tell you something. We don't have enough lifetime to evolve. We're too small to be able to create the world. So what do we know when we look at the world? What can we surmise? Obviously something greater than us created it. And it's here, and because it's here, we know that there's something had to create it. If you were running through a jungle and you were trying to outrun some people who were behind you, and you thought it was an uninhabited island, and you ran into a building, you would not expect that the building was evolution growing out of the trees, but rather that somebody created it. So we know this, we understand this. What they say about evolution is a lie. And let me tell you this, we have no transitional beings alive or dead. There are no beings that were partially this and then partially that we've ever found in fossils or walking around the earth today. I know that affects you people who are longing to see Sasquatch and that kind of stuff. And I know that you want to see maybe a werewolf or something like that. That stuff just doesn't exist. And it's all in the stories to take your mind away into lies of the world instead of to the truth of God. And he's given this to you to help you understand when he created the earth, just on the sixth day, he created mankind and all the animals that roam on the earth. And yes, that includes the dinosaurs, which, by the way, was a word that was coined in 1963 and meant terrible lizards, and the lizards were the ones that walk like this, like crocodiles. Well, there are some big lizards that had this points on their back and scales and everything that walked like that, and they were terrible, and they were hard to hunt and kill, and they were plaguing mankind. If you don't remember, I talked about this before, there was a Dragon's Chronicles that was in England even as late as the 1600, in which the dragons were scaring people and killing their animals and scaring their chickens where they wouldn't lay and so on and so forth. And so they would put out a newspaper about where the sightings were. And I don't know if you know this, there are still pterodactyls today. They're just smaller. How do you stop something from growing? Well, you kill it. If you were to go down to the Everglades and you were to find a 30-foot alligator, they're going to be down there hunting that sucker until they find it, because they're just not that big. And the reason they're not that big is because they keep hunting alligators. And the bigger they get, the more points they get, and they can put it on their wall, and so they would have done that. Well, we know that Nimrod was a mighty hunter, and that was important because when they came out of the garden, they had all this to deal with. They had to make sure that they were safe, and they were building cities and so on and so forth. I don't know whether you ever watched any of the videos of elephants on a rampage, a rogue elephant on a rampage over in India, and they destroy the towns. Of course, they're not made out of much. They're made out of sheet metal, tin, and stuff like that, But they were out there and they destroyed it all, and they killed people. I was watching one the other day, and he hit the man with his trunk, and he kept running until he stomped on it, and then he stood there on the guy. So you can imagine what it would be like if you had dinosaurs still living with us today. Or rather, see, this has become an encompassed word in which we use for all those animals that lived back before man, and that is not true. In fact, they wanted to say the trilobite, which would be smaller than this creature right here. The trilobite kind of looks like this with a little body, and they would go out and find them. They said, this is the one that's 4 million years old. How do you know it's 4 million years old? It's in the layer of rocks that we know are 4 million years old. Oh! And so they would go out and find them, and they would take and break open rocks, and the rock. You ever seen fossils like that? You go into these stores, what they call the Discover stores, or some kind of stores that were in malls, but when we had malls, and you would go in there and you could buy all kinds of geological rocks and stuff in there and things. Anyway, they would break open these rocks, and there would be a fossil of a trilobite laying there. The problem with it was there was a guy who really loved to go out and do that to prove to people that man did not exist with trilobites, and he goes out there, he cracks open a rock, and there's a trilobite in the footprint of a sandal of a man. And the reason they say that the trilobite was the oldest was because where they found it in the sediment after the flood. And by the way, the trilobite has such amazing eyes, and the cones that are in those eyes could not possibly mutate in billions and billions of years. It had to be created by your God. We cannot let this go. And let me tell you why I'm telling you. because you're in charge of children and you can help them understand it's a lie, even though they go back to school and hear it again and again and again. And the reason why they hear it is because when they suppress the truth, they don't have to listen to the truth. The truth is right here. This is the truth. I created it, God said. And you couldn't do it, God said. So it's too small, the changes, and we're too small to change the set laws of God. The laws, of flight and of gravity, and we worry about AI and stuff like that. We get all sorts of saying, "Oh man, what if the machines get so intelligent they take over, and we have to go in there and destroy them, and they'll know we're coming because they already know." But the reality is, there are set laws of God. How do you know that it's one God? Why isn't it more? The native Indians, they would worship the mountains here. They would worship, maybe some of them worship the sun or the wind or the rain. But the reality is, because all those things work together for the good of man and function properly, like when you can get a plane with these curved wings, if you ever notice they've got a curve like this. In fact, if you were to take a piece of paper and you were to curve it that way and put it on a pencil and you were to blow across it, it would lift better. And the reason it lifts is because that's the way God made it. And so it goes against the law of gravity until you run out of fuel, and guess what? The law of gravity is right there to take over. So you see how they work together? That shows one creator. Does that make sense? We can see where Solomon tells us that the water comes up out of the ocean, goes into the sky, goes over and rains on the land, and the water goes into the river and goes back to the ocean. We can see that's exactly right. But who could have guessed that? Except unless we take observation where we are looking at the object, objective observation, and we see it happening, and we see, oh, that was written long before man even knew, then God must be right. So when we see that, we can see we're too small to change the set laws. You mate a horse with a donkey, and you come out with a mule. But the mule is always, what's the word I'm trying to think? Sterile, thank you. There are times when I have these mental blocks. No, it's not sickle cell. And they're just in a room I can't access real quick with the door. And they're sterile, and they can't reproduce because this is a kind and that's a kind and this is not a kind. Now, do you get a good worker? Yeah. He's strong, he's capable, doesn't need as much water as the horse. He's capable of going further distance. He can see all four hooves. The horse cannot at the same time. That's why they use them going, donkeys and mules going down into the Grand Canyon, because they can see where they're putting every foot. And that's what you want. If you're going down and there's no rail, and my wife be screaming the whole time. I would, but be on the inside. So you have to understand there are set laws. God's creation proves his existence. And he's proving it to you on a daily basis. He's doing that so you could know him and care about him and understand he is there. And we're too small to even consider ourselves as God. When you think about people, and there can't even be photographed from outer space, which is close to the earth. And all of us people, believe it or not, are on the side of the earth as it's spinning thousands of miles an hour. And we're not being flung off. How do we think we can change and say that we ourselves are God? How can we say, I know better than God? Like Eve did in the garden. What Satan's saying is a possible truth. No. What God has said is already the truth, and you knew it. I mean, look how small you are. And you're small for a reason. You're limited for a reason. So you won't think you are God. And God has given us, oh, by the way, tonight we're going to talk about, and I don't care what that paper says. Tonight we're talking about Beyond the Stars. What kind of information have we had from Beyond the Stars? Okay, so let's turn over to Acts chapter 17, and let's see what he says there so that we can know. Acts 17, Paul goes into this town of philosophers. He goes up to where all the philosophers are. He's walked through and he's seen that they worship certain people. They got statues to all kinds of gods and everything. Look what he says here in verse 24 through 31. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gave all man life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver, an image made by man's design and skills. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, for he has set a day wherein he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead. When they heard this, they were about the resurrection of the dead. Some of them answered, and others said, we want to hear you again on this subject. Okay, so Harry is talking about. He put you where you are, not so you couldn't move. I used to worry about whether I should move out of Texas because Paul said, be content wherever state you're in. But I didn't worry about it. What he's saying is, you are enough to love me and to follow me and to live with me forever. He created you because he wanted you to be with him forever. Yet man longs to have no authority over his actions. How dare you tell me what to do? Have you seen the videos of people being stopped on the side of the road by the police, and they're telling the police that they can't even take them out of the car, they can't give them a ticket, they're not going to sign the ticket, they're not going to do anything they want? I mean, my goodness. This is a direct result of evolutionary thinking. I am God. I know better than you. I'm better than you. I'm going to take and do whatever I want. I'm going to do whatever I want, and I don't care who you are. I don't believe there's a God. I don't think so, and yet they'll go do the same thing again and get the same results and wonder why. Would you ever buy a car if you didn't believe that God had the laws set for that thing to crank when you turn the key on? Why do you even use a key? You know it's the only way to start it. I mean, think about it. You know this. And you know there is an authority over your actions. You know it, especially when you get caught in the wrong. So, man longs for no authority. And this has to be fought. The self has to be taken out of place in order to be a Christian. You have to learn how to submit to God. But you know, there are so many people out there in the world who say no to the Bible. We go talk to them. Oh, no, I don't believe that garbage. Go to church. Oh, I'm not going to church. No way. They'll even see you out there handing out pamphlets about coming to church, inviting people to heaven. And they'll walk around you so they aren't even influenced by your breath. Man knows. All mankind turns to God in trouble. Don't you know? When people are hurting, they will ask you to pray for them. They will say, we'll pray for you. We'll send prayers and good thoughts. They know when they're hurting or when they've had problems, had troubles. They know that they want to turn to something that is bigger than them. And everybody knows there is something larger than they are. Everybody knows it. And God did all of this so that you would seek Him. He says, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Meaning, if your heart's not in it, you're not going to find it. You may find something else, but you're not going to find God. Wise men still seek God. Not just the ones in the story about Jesus' birth, but the story today. Here's the question for you. Are you wise? Oh man, I had that there, but push it and it wouldn't go. Are you wise enough to know God and to come to Him as you should? If you're not right with God, if you've not been baptized for the removal of your sins and to receive the blessing of the Holy Spirit, the gift of the Holy Spirit, you are not with God. Your name is not written in the book of life, and you will not be with Him in eternity. If you need help with that, you can come forward as we stand and sing this song together.